we always make sure we talk about the impact, a member story, share a member story of how we help. And those members that are there will tell us that they are so proud to be at the credit union. I have one in particular that whose face I always see, who says, I'm beyond my borrowing years. But what I love most about being a part of this credit union is knowing that you're using my money to help.
Mm.
I love getting the newsletters every quarter and reading the member story. Because every quarter we share a story about how we've helped a member. So member testimonial stories, and they love reading that. And they love the fact that we give back within our community. That's important to them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So
yeah, absolutely. Well, I think, the more that we can grow that idea and, help credit unions tell their story, to their communities. I mean, it's so easy. I mean, I'm sure you have a million examples of where like you met someone who didn't really understand what a credit union was, and then you explained to them the model and, how it's cooperative finance and people helping people. And then like you just see like the light turn on and they're like I remember very distinctly a conversation. I was in DC, and I was with my cousin who lives in DC, and I was there right before a GAC, and she was kind of asking me about my job in credit unions and like, what is a credit union? And I was walking down the street with her, and I explained to her the whole concept. She turns to me and she's like, "Why aren't we all members of credit unions?" And I'm like, I know, exactly. So we have what we have on our side is the business model. We have the mission. We have the right incentives as organizations, and we just got to tell that story. We got to keep telling that story. I'm really happy to introduce Karen Madry, President and CEO of Afena Federal Credit Union in Marion, Indiana, to the Credit Union Nation podcast. Karen, thanks so much for joining.
thank you for having me, Tom.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I know that you've been listening a little bit to the podcast. You've had some personal things that you've been doing where you require a lot of things to listen to, whether it's music or podcasts. So do you want to share a little bit about why you've been needing so much content to listen to? What's going on in your personal life there?
So I have decided to take on this personal challenge. I am going to walk a mini marathon this year. So I'm a proud 63-year-old woman. I know most women do not say how old they are, but my goal is to be healthier as I get older. And so I thought, what a wonderful time to try to do this. I used to walk a lot of 5Ks, but I have not walked in a 5K for over 12 years. And last year I started on a healthy journey, and I've lost about 26 pounds. And but I've been sedentary. So I thought I need to do more. And so training for this marathon would force me to be more active, and I need to do it. I'm not a runner, so I said I would walk it.
Yeah.
And so there were many marathons that lead up to it. So there was a 3-mile race, then a 6-mile race, a 10-mile race, and then the marathon is in May. And so I don't always enjoy quite listening to music all the time. So sometimes I walk to a book or something else. So one day when I did my 6-mile, I decided to catch up on all of your podcasts. So I was able to make my way through 3 or 4 of them over my 6-mile walk. And it was perfect to pace it to that because it was cold outside and I didn't want to walk too fast. So that was a perfect thing to listen to while I did that walk. So thank you.
Yeah, no, my pleasure, without a doubt. Yeah, I'm someone who likes to run a lot. I did my first marathon, my only marathon, a couple of years ago, and yeah, I mean, so many hours of podcasts consumed during that training time because it's very time consuming. A lot of music too. It sort of depends. Like if I'm like really trying to push myself, I think I need some energetic music to push me. But sometimes you just need like a conversation to keep you company for a long stretch. It tends to make things go by fast a little bit. So hopefully this podcast is doing that for lots of people out there. And looking forward to bringing this podcast to everybody. So, getting into the sort of the credit union side of the conversation, Karen and I got to see each other last week in Atlanta at the African American Credit Union Coalition Small Credit Union Summit. And for those of you who haven't heard what that session was or what that event was, it was an opportunity to bring together credit unions and business partners to kind of talk about the big issues facing small credit unions and how we could come together as different segments of the industry to solve some of those issues. And, I think it was one of the unique and few times where Karen wasn't asked to be a speaker. And it was no slight on Karen. I think we've all been to great events where Karen has shared her story, but I think it gave you the opportunity finally to just sit back and listen and gain ideas yourself. So curious to know what you thought of the event and what were some of your big takeaways from the conference?
Yes, I agree. It definitely uh, was relaxing, more relaxing for me not to be on the agenda. I appreciated it and I did get to enjoy it a lot more. Um,
Mhm.
I love the fact that we had large credit unions, there are small credit unions and vendors coming together in one room. The panel discussions I thought were great. It gave us an opportunity to hear what other credit unions were doing from all around, all across the US, right? Not just in our backyard. And I had quite a few takeaways. I took a lot of notes. I know quite a few other people were taking notes. And some vendors, I met some vendors that I had never met before. So what I loved about the event was that the room wasn't filled with, no slight on these vendors, but the Pfizer's, the Valeras, and the big names. These were small vendors like us small credit unions that we may not have ever met before at these really large events because they may not be able to afford to buy the booth space, right? And we
Yeah.
had time to really socialize with them and get to know them. I have in Indiana, I have hosted several Rex Johnson um, University of Lending schools for the
Mm.
state, and now Rex Johnson's school is kind of in a different state now that he has passed away, and the consultant I worked with has subsequently retired and some others have retired. So I met another company who has grown up under Rex Johnson's philosophy, who is doing something very similar. So I'm interested to go to their school and see how they teach and if their philosophy align with ours, so I can continue that training with my staff. Um, and just other ways to, I walked away with a lot of other ideas of how I might be able to cut costs in my credit union and operate more
Mhm.
efficiently
Mhm.
without necessarily losing service. So that was one aspect of it. But the thing that I loved the most about that event was the working groups.
Mm.
And
Mhm.
quite often we go to conferences and we walk away with a whole bunch of ideas and then we go back to our office and that's it, right?
Mhm.
But
Mhm. Yep.
this conference had these working groups and they had identified the problems. They had a really good plan laid out of here's what we want to do. So they had a foundation and they were looking for people to help them further vet these ideas. Um, we they wanted 3 takeaways at that meeting, and then immediately they're starting to have the next discussion with this group. So who will participate in this working group? And here's our end goal, and who's going to help us get here? And we're going to continue to work together. And those of us who volunteer to be on a working group realize that this is not something that's going to happen overnight, may not happen by the end of this year. It may take a few years, but we are working to solve a real world problem together. And we're doing with the help of large credit unions, vendors, and our peers. So I felt like it was time well spent, and I felt like we are really a group that's working together to truly solve problems, not just sit around a table and talk about them, but we are committed to doing something to make it the industry stronger and really move forward for small credit unions.
Yeah. Could not agree more. I have to hand it to Renee Sadie White, the president and CEO of the AACUC, for putting together that style of event, right? It's not like, as you were saying, it's not like a lot of other events that I've attended where there's really action built into the conference, right? Like it wasn't like, okay, you learned a bunch of things, now go back to your credit unions and try to implement them. It was, okay, here are some concepts. Let's talk about them and work on them in small groups and actually start building them out right here and right now, to see if we can have something, if we can stand something up even faster. And so, as I said to Renee when she was on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, actually it's been a few months at this point. She has always been a big proponent for small credit unions and huge advocate for small credit unions, and just huge kudos to her. And I really appreciate her support. I think there's a lot of exciting things that came out of the event. One of the things that was a big point of conversation was the CRX model, which is this concept that Linda White from CULA, Credit Unions Women's Leadership Alliance, shout out, they're trying to sort of put together, which is this idea where a group of credit unions would sort of come together and put out a call to retired executives and retired CEOs of credit unions, who would then come in and advise current CEOs who are looking for support in any area that they need as it relates to running a credit union. I think it definitely fills a huge need for small credit unions. When you're the CEO of a small shop, you don't have a lot of other support. You don't have a lot of other in-house expertise and knowledge. And so if you can tap into, folks who have been there before and who know how to, wage a war as the leader of a small credit union, that's pretty invaluable. And so things like that address a big issue facing small credit unions and that will leverage AACUC support, I think that bodes well for sort of bringing that idea to life. So really excited for that concept and a couple of others that came out of there. Yeah, for sure.
I think probably for me, the hardest thing was I could not split myself into 3 people to be in all the working groups at the same time, because the hardest thing was to decide which one to go to and participate in. And I was very happy that at the end of the day, one of the leaders from another working group came up and said, Karen, I know you were in this one, but do you have interest in being in mine? And I said, yes, because I was torn between which one to go to, but I peeked in your room and you had a lot of people. So I went to the other one because they didn't have as many. And I wanted to be supportive. So I was thrilled. So now I'm on 2 working groups. But the other thing, you're right. First off, shout out to Renee, because we were all part of the best class ever, winter 2017.
That's right.
We became DEs together, and anything that Renee puts her thumbprint on seems to turn into gold. So I have no doubt that this is going to be another successful project, another thing that she will put in her memoirs, her repertoire of all of her wonderful accomplishments as the leader of AACUC. Just having her name behind it, it will be successful. And I'm just honored that, I've known Renee for so many years, and I always tell her that a lot of what the initiatives that I've started at my credit union started from the very first AACUC meeting that I went to and the people that I
Mm.
met there, and just networking and the things I learned, stepping outside of my comfort zone here in Indiana and getting to that national level and having an opportunity to talk to some people, and her saying, oh, you need to talk to this person, Karen. And, Renee is very good at connecting people and
Yes.
helping them talk to each other and say, tell her what you're doing about this, and understanding your passion and how it connects well with someone else. So that is
Yeah,
her gift.
it was such a yeah, totally. Yep. I mean, Renee is always introducing you to people for sure. And the conference or the summit last week was such a great reminder of what you're saying of getting yourself out of your credit union and going out there and meeting other credit union people or other business partners. Just the fact of the matter is there are thousands of credit unions across the country and hundreds in your market that you have the ability to learn from. And everyone does things a little bit different. Everyone has come up with new and creative and fun and effective ideas that you probably haven't thought of at your shop. And so use the fact that our industry loves to host these events as the opportunity to learn new things to improve yourself as a credit union professional or to improve your operations as a credit union. I mean, that resource is invaluable. It's out there for you, and you should definitely be taking advantage. I will say it was really special to meet the founders of PPC. I don't remember. Do you remember, what does that stand for? What does PPP stand for?
I don't remember.
Performance.
I don't
I'll look it
remember.
up. I'll look it up in a second. But they, like you were saying, they're sort of disciples, if you will, of Rex Johnson and the Rex Johnson philosophy of lending. And for those of you who aren't aware, Rex Johnson pioneered high risk, high yield lending, which helps credit unions serve underserved communities because it allows them to price their loans in a way that helps them offset the risk of serving underserved individuals, right? And I actually ended up going out to dinner with the founder on, I think it was on Wednesday night. And he told me the whole story about how he knew Rex, from the very beginning. And I know, did you met Rex, right?
Yes,
Back in the
I
day?
knew
Yeah,
that.
because he's Illinois. We're all Illinois folks,
Yes.
right? Go Bears. And and I think he just really sort of, bought into this philosophy and is now becoming, I think their operation is pretty small still. They only have maybe 10 clients who they do underwriting for, but then they also have a larger number of clients that they do training for. They do training for underwriting as well. And it's becoming what it sounds like, sort of the next big thing in that space. And so for us at your credit union partner, who works with a lot of credit unions that serve underserved communities, we're constantly recommending University of Lending training, which is Rex Johnson's program. And so to have another resource to be able to share with credit unions that look, they seem really hungry, don't they? I mean,
Yes,
they
I do.
seem, first and foremost, they seem really passionate about the work that they're doing. Just sitting down with them and hearing like just how much they love traveling to credit unions and providing that training and doing that work. They seem like they really love it, but they also seem hungry to grow and to bring their services to more credit unions. And so to hear them kind of talk about their business and what they're trying to do was really special. And that meeting them and hearing the stories about working with Rex was worth the trip, alone. I mean, it was really, really cool. So
Yeah.
definitely a great resource out there. We are not sponsored by PC or, they don't even know we're doing this, but, they seem like really, really great people. And I'm sure they've got great references if you're if you're interested in that service for sure. But it was a great event. Thank you so much to AAC for hosting. They have their annual conference coming up, which always has a small credit union summit at the beginning. And that's in late July. So check out their website if you're interested in attending, also in Atlanta as well. I did want to ask you, Karen, about your big moment last year. Not that you only had one, but you had a particularly big moment when you were asked by America's Credit Unions to testify before Congress. Actually, I guess the invite was technically from Senator Tim Scott from the state of South Carolina. But it was one of the coolest text messages or calls. I think you actually called me and you told me that you had this invitation. And I think when you first called, you were like, "Well, it's possible. Like I'm in the running to testify before Congress." And then like a few hours later, you call me and you're like, I'm doing it. It's happening." And then I think you then like the realization set in and you started feeling all the feels that one should experience when asked to do something as momentous as testifying before Congress. But I just wanted to have you share a little bit about that experience, the honor of being invited, and what it was like, of course, sitting before all of these elected officials and kind of that experience. And then maybe after that, we can also talk about what's even more important, which was the issue that you were there to address. But, do you want to walk us through how it all happened?
Sure. And I think the first call I made was to you, Tom. After I received the message, the call, I hung up and I called you from the airport in Arizona. I was traveling back from a much
That's right.
vacation. And I think the question was, should I do this? Should I even be considering this?
Yes.
So I was floored when I was asked. I was nervous. You know, as you're aware, and I don't know if the people, I'm visually impaired, so reading anything is the hardest thing in the world for me. And so I always speak from my heart. So I'm not a scripted person by any means. And I know that when I watch hearings, everybody's scripted. And I was really concerned about that. And I expressed my concern and I basically told them, if you want a scripted speaker, I am not the person. I can't do it. I just cannot. I can't put that pressure on myself. And so there was a lot of back and forth on it. And I guess there were a few people who advocated and said, I hear her. There were some that felt strongly about having a scripted speaker, but there was more who said, no, we want her. So we were in the midst of our NCUA exam. The exam was getting started. And I walk in the door and I tell my examiner, hello, but I will be leaving right back out to go to Washington, D.C. because I had taken a few days off while they were here to testify. And he says, well, I guess I can't tell you not to do that. That's an honor for you to do. So
right, yeah.
NCUA was very supportive of me going to do this.
Yeah.
It was very interesting. You get off the plane, you head to America's Credit Union and they prep you. And because I was not scripted, we spent some time talking about my talking points when I had my 5 minutes to speak, to present my case. I think for me, the biggest thing, the thing I remember the most, couple of things, but so I was one Republican and one person representing the Republicans' point of view. Clarify that because
right.
One person representing the Republicans' point of view and two people representing the Democratic point of view. So when I was with America's Credit Union, they were expecting to get a lot of questions that they expected to be asked of me. And there were just a few that trickled in throughout the course of the day. The guy to my right had like 30 index cards in front of him. So when they were asking questions, now I could have never pulled this off because I can't see as well, you could see him kind of going through the cards to figure out which one had the answer to the question. And then he'd pick up the card and basically had all his bullet points answer.
Oh my gosh.
I was like, yeah, well, they really stacked the deck. He was he was over prepared. And that was the housing guy and the other guy. I don't remember their names. The other guy was the Hispanic guy. He was not as well versed. It didn't seem, or he didn't have all the index cards, and they didn't ask him nearly as many questions.
Mm-hmm.
The experience was interesting and frustrating all at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
You really can't. I wanted to address one particular senator, but the questions never came to me, and I think they didn't come to me for a reason, because they knew I would have had a rebuttal for
Right.
everything that they said. And the facts were being, you know, twisted in a way that was not quite accurate. You're reminded that the camera is out there, the television is out there, so be mindful of your face, facial expressions, be mindful. So you're smiling on the outside, but on the inside, you're like, holding it
If
all
only I could
in.
really give this person a piece of my mind
Yes, it's
in
like,
front of the entire country.
yes, yes, yes. And you're just trying to keep it all together, not knowing what's being shown to the outside world, and you want to have a pretty smile on your face for the whole event. But it was definitely a wonderful experience. I still have not gone back and watched it, but I had probably about 50 text messages when it was all over
Yeah.
from friends, credit union, family saying you did a great job. So
Oh, you should go back and watch it, Karen. You would be so proud. I know that you're never in anything for yourself, and so it's probably against your sort of personal beliefs to go back and look at how great you did. But you were absolutely amazing, and just knowing your story and knowing that it isn't scripted whatsoever, but that you're still able to speak so eloquently and so clearly and so confidently about a pretty complicated issue in front of maybe one of the scariest audiences that you'll ever speak in front of. It was like astoundingly impressive. It was so good. You clearly got the attention of everybody. So like from my perspective, I was watching right here, sitting in this chair, and I was watching online, and you delivered your marks extremely well. And then what happened was, Tim, Senator Scott, he came back with some questions for you, which were good questions and allowed you to sort of expound a little bit more on some of the issues that you were there to address. And just so that everyone knows, you were there to talk about what I think was billed sort of the junk fee hearing. But from your perspective, it was largely on overdraft fees and credit card fees. And so Senator Scott had some good questions, and I think a couple of the other Republican senators also had a couple of questions. I think JD Vance asked you a question, didn't he? He was there at least and made a couple comments. Yeah.
I think he did. I can't remember who else asked, it's such a whirlwind.
Yes. But then you had all of the Democratic senators come in, and none of them, I'm sure none of them asked you a question. Not one of them asked you a question. And mostly they did pose a couple of questions to the other witnesses, but mostly they just made their own pronouncements and their own statements that sort of fit into the narrative of like the purpose of the hearing according to the Democratic Party. Now, this is not a political podcast. I'm not going to tell you what my political affiliation is, but it was a shame that you had someone like yourself who was a practitioner, someone who serves under an underserved community, who really knows your stuff, right? Like you really understand what you're talking about, and it was clear that you did based on how, how well you sort of presented the issue. And the fact that, all these senators didn't take that opportunity to pick your brain, truly pick your brain and learn, kind of what your perspective was, that's a missed opportunity. That's absolutely a missed opportunity for them. So it was a little bit disappointing from that standpoint. I do think that John Tester called you the credit union lady, if you
Yes.
remember that, which I think
Yes.
was a highlight. And he's a Democrat, and I think he listened, right? He was listening, and he sort of shared a couple things that used some of your words, and that was great to hear. And he called you the credit union lady, so that was awesome. But more than anything else, you got to know, Karen, that you did awesome. You represented the credit union industry extremely well. You represented your credit union extremely well, and you obviously represented yourself extremely well. And so, what if this credit union thing never or doesn't pan out? You have a career in politics, let me tell you, because you can duel with the best of them. I promise you.
Well, thank you, Tom. I will share it. The Ohio League sent me a nice message and said, because Sherrod Brown acknowledged the work that credit unions do. And they said that it was very hard to get him to ever acknowledge that
Mm,
credit unions are different and that we really serve a purpose. But what frustrated me the most, um, and again, not being political, but in the end, Elizabeth, we were talking about the credit card late fees and why she, you know, was in support of the $8.50 lowering the rate and how that was going to help low income individuals. And that was the statement I wanted to rebut because, you know, I just don't always think they look at the big picture because in reality, yes, the Chases, the Wells Fargos, the Citibanks, they lower the fee to $8.50. But in the same vein, what they did was they raised the interest rate. I'm a federally chartered credit union. My interest rates are capped at 18%. But my credit cards, my rewards credit card is 12%. 16% is the highest that I have. So
mhm,
I can't raise my interest rates to offset lower credit card fees.
right.
And while those fees, the lower fees does not apply to my credit card because I'm below that threshold, there's that trickle down effect, right? Because my members can say, well, I don't want your credit card because you have a higher fee. They don't look at the interest rate, they just look at the fees. So
Right.
members don't really understand, or the interest rate doesn't necessarily process with them. So by lowering my ability to make money on my card portfolio, when most credit unions my size, 100 million, we have to evaluate, really the credit card program is a loss leader for us. We don't even make much money on it.
Yeah,
And
it's a
so,
service. It's
yeah,
absolutely a service. It's not a
it's a,
revenue generator. Yeah.
no, it's not. So now we're going to really lose money on it. So if I stop offering credit cards to my members, Chase is not going to offer them a credit card. So they will not have any opportunities. And what she's doing is sending them back to the payday lender. They're going to be sent to a lender of last resort. So when you're doing things that will impact credit and possibly cause us to go away or reduce our services, all you're doing is the members that I serve a rural environment, a lot of low income family members. You are putting my members at risk of having no other alternative other than the finance companies and the payday companies, which are the companies that we are committed to trying to pull our members away from.
Yeah.
And that was a point that I wanted to tell her that, the logic, I'm sorry, is wrong. And you got to look at the bigger picture. But I didn't get to say it. And that was what frustrated me the most.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. It's like you probably think of you know, these opportunities, and you probably you probably didn't get a great night of sleep the night before because you're just thinking about everything that you want to say and you know, how it's all going to go. But you know, whatever you did say, whatever you didn't get an opportunity to say, you did an awesome job, Karen. It was so good. You should go back and watch it. You would be so proud. You would be so proud. So it was really great. And you know, the other thing that you had the opportunity to talk about, which is sort of similar in nature to the credit card issue, was overdraft. And on overdraft, you just wrote an op-ed that appeared in American Banker yesterday. No, I'm sorry, Friday. Gosh, what are my days? Friday, Thursday,
Thursday, I think.
Thursday,
Yeah.
Thursday. So that's really exciting. You got to bring more light to that issue, and you know how your credit union you know, leverages that program to help underserved people. Do you want to talk a little bit about that issue and you know why you wanted to speak out on it?
Sure. Um, which goes along with what I testified about. One of the things, I serve on the Small Credit Union Committee, which we missed you, Tom, so much.
I've never heard of that. What is that committee?
I threw my hat in the ring to serve because you were our fearless leader. And after visiting the roundtables and seeing the wonderful work that you were doing, I was like, this is something I want to be a part of. And then you left me. But one of the things that you taught us in that committee is that when we advocate, even though we're really looking at the issues that face small credit unions, we're advocating for the industry as a whole, right? So with this overdraft courtesy pay, you know, recently last year, I believe it was, that once this junk fee started to become an issue, uh, somebody at NCUA said, hey, let's highlight how much large credit unions are collecting on NSF fees and courtesy pay fees, right? And so it became a line item on the call report, which can be misinterpreted easily. Numbers are great, but if you don't have context behind them, you can swing them any way you want. And you really need context. And while credit unions my size and small credit unions, they don't have to report that information. It was one of the things that we, as a small credit union committee, felt that we didn't really want it on the call report. We felt like, and we had seen where people had been using it as ammunition to talk about credit unions gouging their members and abusing their members, when we know that it's something different. Not at the 2025 but 2024 small credit union committee meeting. We met with the CFPB, and I was able to share some statistics about my credit union. And one of the things that I shared with the CFPB is that, you know, we teach our members how to use courtesy pay responsibly. So I have a lot of low income members, and what we tell our members is do not use your courtesy pay by swiping your debit card. Come in, do an over the counter transaction, say, hey, I want to tap into my overdraft courtesy pay. I want all the money, transfer it into my savings account, pay one fee, and be done with it. If you use it, fine. If you don't, it's in your account, and you can, when you pay it back, you pay it back. So the majority of the members, they only get one courtesy pay fee per month because they're living, my members are living on $600 and $700 a month. The ones that get multiple fees are the ones that work a decent job. They're considered middle income. They don't care about paying.
Right.
But that courtesy pay is there for members when they need it. Overdraft protection means that my members, when they do not have enough money for their mortgage payment or rent payment, they can rest easy at night knowing that that check will clear and they don't have to worry about their landlord getting a return check.
Yep.
And then that landlord charging them a $50 fee. And then telling them, you know what, you can't pay by check anymore. And now they have to go out and get cash or money order. And when they need gas, they don't have to worry about getting a decline when they're down to fumes in their car.
Yep.
Or if their refrigerator is bare on Wednesday and they don't get paid until Friday and they have 4 kids at home they're trying to feed, they know they can go to the grocery store and put food on their table.
Yeah.
So I have heard countless stories from my members about how courtesy pay is a service that they really appreciate. So during GAC, Chairman Haltman announced that he was taking that line item off the call report. And a former CEO wrote an op-ed that he thought that was the worst thing on the face of the earth, and that credit unions was gouging their members and just misconstruing the facts and painting us in a very negative light, which is interesting that a former credit union CEO would take a stand against credit unions. And so I just wrote an op-ed to try to set the record straight that said that is not what we do. And, you know, and it's not that my credit union is any different than most credit unions, but courtesy pay is a service. It is a service that members value and that we're not gouging our members. And what is the alternative? If we didn't offer it, what would happen? You know, my members wouldn't be able to eat. They wouldn't be able to go to work. So then what would happen?
Right.
You know, I remember, I'm old enough to remember when a check would bounce, people's pictures would be in the grocery store because they wouldn't accept their check anymore.
That's right. Yeah.
I want to go back to those days.
Yeah.
So I can show, and just looking at one number won't show the trend. So in my personal credit union, my courtesy pay income is decreasing. It's declining because one thing is we've introduced Q Cash, which is, you know, they can go online and get a payday alternative loan 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so a lot of our members are using that instead of courtesy pay. And so we're seeing a steady decline in our courtesy pay income. Do I care? No. Whatever works best for our members. I just want my members to be financially sound and healthy, make good decisions for themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. And be a lifeline for them too when times are tight. Like I remember you talking about this a couple of years ago. And the picture that's really sticks with me as you've spoken passionately about this is, the working mom standing in line at the grocery store with a basket or a cart full of groceries on the conveyor belt, a line of people behind her, and making a payment and it getting declined. And that's the food that she's going to bring home to feed her kids, right? And by allowing her to make that purchase, you are helping her feed those kids, right? And I just think that there's such an important service there that helps particularly people who are, really in need, and who are really disadvantaged. And so it's not as easy as I think some people make it out to be, or it's not as black and white as people make it out to be, that all financial institutions are using these services to be predatory and just prop up their balance sheets. I mean, it's not about that in credit unions. And to me, it really speaks to the importance of separating credit unions out from banks and other financial institutions. As we think about advocacy as an industry moving forward, I think any way that we can disalign ourselves from other financial institutions, the better off we'll be on issues like this and other issues. It shouldn't be the banks and the credit unions, or the credit unions and the banks. It should be the banks are playing in their own playground. They're doing their own thing with different incentives and different protocols. And the credit union industry is completely separate from that because their incentives are completely different, right? I think we would do really well from by really separating our two industries as much as we can on the credit union side. So if
I
anyone's listening out there in the advocacy world, those are my 2 cents, right?
And as you know, I have a great relationship with former Chairman Todd Harper, and, he asked, what about giving them a line of credit? And we do offer a line of credit that our members can attach to their checking account, and the money would transfer at no fee. But not everybody wants a line of credit or a loan. A lot of people are not comfortable with a loan. So we
Right.
do offer that as an option, but
Mhm.
you can't force a person to take out a loan because they're
Yeah.
afraid that that would get out of control.
Yeah. Right. That's right. That's right. Well, this has gone by extremely fast, as it always does, and I think, Karen, at some point you and I need to record a 2-hour marathon podcast because I know we could fill it easily. I remember, gosh, when was it? It was right when I think I was transitioning to Y Cup. You and I had like a 4-hour, like a 3-hour phone call or something, just talking credit union strategy. And we can do it all day. But being mindful of everyone's time. I don't know if everyone's running or walking a marathon. So if you're not, we're just going to ask a couple more questions here of our esteemed guest. And the last two questions that I like to ask are, first, what is the thing that keeps you up at night the most about the future of the credit union industry? And then the second question is, what are you most excited about in relation to the credit union industry? So either order, you can answer the questions however you'd like.
Well, Tom, what keeps me up most at night about the credit union industry? Glad you preferenced it with the credit union industry. You know, I think one thing that keeps me up is the fact that we're constantly losing a credit union day. It's still the number of credit unions that are disappearing is unnerving to me. I ask myself why. I ask myself, what can we do to prevent that from happening? How can we move the industry forward? You and I have talked a lot about some of the barriers that I think, or the reasons that I believe this is occurring. But that really bothers me a lot, that our industry is shrinking. And because the credit union is a movement, right? And we are constantly advocating for our industry to stay alive. We need to have a sufficient number of credit unions available to really fight, to make a strong argument for the fight. So if
Mhm.
we're going to dwindle down to 1,000 credit unions, when we advocate for our own separate regulators and remain independent of banks, it does get harder to make that argument to justify the cost, right?
Mm. Mhm.
The fraud, the constant threat of fraud, the fraudsters are getting smarter and smarter, the cybersecurity threats, just the rising costs to run operations. And yet, how do you keep up with all of these new requirements and the needs of our members and wants, I should say, of our members? when our margins are constantly being pressed. So just how do you continue to make the numbers work? And at what point is small too small to continue to function? So
Yeah.
that's really what keeps me up at night.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
So what am I excited about? I think what I'm most excited about is it, going to the AACUC summit and listening to a lot of my peers in small credit union scene, de novo still being formed. There, even though credit unions are closing, I think that we can still make a huge impact. There is so much we can still do. There's so much work to do. What I love about this industry, and I'm a former banker, right? And I worked for a bank that was merged into another bank. And at the time that it was merged, and I received phone calls from several banks in Chicago. Hey, Karen, come work for us. Come work for us. But my heart wasn't in it because I saw the greed and it just didn't align with my values and what I wanted to do. And then I came over to the credit union industry because I have a heart for service, right? I want to help people.
Right.
And so what I love about our industry is how we're able to carve out a niche for ourselves, right? We're not answering to these shareholders that's so greedy that says, hey, you got to make a profit of this, and I'm just focused on the bottom line and what you're going to put in my pocket. We really can make a difference in the communities that we serve. We can figure out how to organize our business to have a true impact in our communities. So there are still great opportunities. There is great work for us to do, and we can be innovative when we do it. And that's what sets us apart from banks. And that is what keeps me excited. So, when people ask me, who's your competition? I don't have any. We don't compete against anybody here. There are credit unions here, there's banks here, there's finance companies, because we carved our own little space out in the world and we think what we do is so different from everybody else. And not everybody appreciates what we do, but that's okay. But there's a lot of people who do. And most people, because again, we focus on debt consolidations, getting people out of trouble. So if you're doing well, you may not come to us. But when you get in trouble and you go to every other bank and every other credit union in town and they say no, then that's when you say, well, you know what? I think I'm going to go to Afena because everybody says that when everybody else says no, Afena says yes. So I'm going to go to them because that's the last stop before bankruptcy. They come in and they realize the Afena difference. And then they tell their friends and they bring a friend. And that's how we've been able to grow. So even the banks in our community refer people to us. I mean, we've told them, I'm not your enemy, but if you can't help someone, rather than having them go to the payday lender or the finance company that is going to gouge them, would you at least refer them to us so we can have a chance to help them? Because we're not going to gouge them. We're not going to take their paycheck before it hits their bank account. It hits their bank at 7 and we're going to pull it out at 7:01. We're going to try to help them to make sure they can pay you back as well as pay us back. So we're going to work together as a partner. So banks refer members to us. Heck, the finance companies, when they can't help them, they're referring them to us. So, I just think that that if we really look at our communities and really try to think outside the box, get away from saying, well, this is the way we've always done it. Or I can't because this is just how it's always been. And we start to be a little bit more innovative in our thinking, we will find that there is a wealth of opportunity out there for us. And we have to be willing to take a little bit of risk. We won't get it right the first time, maybe. But remember, if it doesn't work, fine. You're not married to it. I brought products on, they didn't work, and I've canceled them. And none of my members was mad about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
They asked, they came and said, do you still offer that? And no, it really didn't take off. We only had a couple of members that was interested in it, but we have something else we can offer you. Okay.
Mm. Yeah. 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 I mean, I think that, for credit unions that are struggling, if you look at the numbers, right? Like I used to talk to Mike Schenk about this all the time. He presented his numbers to the small credit union committee. He, and I are good friends. And he always tells me about how the industry is doing overall. And he would show me the credit unions under 50 million in assets across the country. And the fact is, sort of the scary fact is, that a lot of them are not adding members, they're declining in members, and they're also not profitable. And so the question is always posed, well, how do we save small credit unions? And that was a big topic of conversation at AACUC last week. And there are great ideas on how to create efficiencies and how to share resources and maybe outsource certain processes that you have at the credit union. But ultimately, and this is what I shared with the group in my opening remarks last week, is we do need to grow, right? You do need to grow in memberships. If you're declining in membership and you're declining in revenue and loans, you're dying as an organization. And so if you're thinking about, as a credit union, where can you grow if you're struggling to grow, trust Karen and trust me, there are lots of underserved people in your communities. And those are the people that need a credit union. If you want to think about a blue ocean strategy, and this is what Scott Butterfield says all the time, if you're looking for a blue ocean, an untapped market, a niche, the underserved community is there for you because no one else is competing for that business. The only people that want that business are the predatory lenders. And you can kick their asses all day and all night. Because you care about those people, right? And you will care about those people. And so, really take a hard look at who is not being served in your community and do what you can to provide services to them, because it'll help your community and it'll help you grow. And I'll share that my sort of, I don't know if it's my vision, but something that I think credit unions could do that would be transformational for the entire country and communities across the country is how you connect the people who have resources with those who don't, right? So we think about a lot of credit unions who serve underserved communities as just serving that type of member and that type of borrower and individual. And oftentimes it is the case, and they run into liquidity challenges and deposit volume challenges, which makes it hard for them to lend. And so if you could communicate to the community that this is who you serve, but you also serve everyone, because the dollars that you deposit into our credit union helps us serve the people who don't have as much as you. You could start transforming these communities and creating sort of this interconnectedness that would bring the community together and open people's eyes and just create more understanding. And I think that is what credit unions have the power to do. And it's not an easy concept, and it would be interesting to try to find credit unions that do a good job of that. That have sort of the more affluent member and also sort of like the really underserved member. I don't know if there are great examples of that out there. But those, if there is, I'm going to make it my own personal goal here to try to find those credit unions and see how we can share that success out, because I think it could be amazing. Absolutely amazing and transformational. So that's what I hope credit unions can accomplish, and that's what I'm excited about. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, at our annual meeting, we generally will have about 100 people at our annual meeting. About 20 of them are staff, 80 are our members, and they are more of our savers, right? And we always make sure we talk about the impact, a member story, share a member story of how we help. And those members that are there, will tell us that they are so proud to be at the credit union. I have one in particular that whose face I always see, who says, I'm beyond my borrowing years. But what I love most about being a part of this credit union is knowing that you're using my money to help.
Mm.
I love getting the newsletters every quarter and reading the member story. Because every quarter we share a story about how we've helped a member. So member testimonial stories, and they love reading that. And they love the fact that we give back within our community. That's important to them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So
yeah, absolutely. Well, I think, the more that we can grow that idea and, help credit unions tell their story, to their communities. I mean, it's so easy. I mean, I'm sure you have a million examples of where like you met someone who didn't really understand what a credit union was, and then you explained to them the model and, how it's cooperative finance and people helping people. And then like you just see like the light turn on and they're like I remember very distinctly a conversation. I was in DC, and I was with my cousin who lives in DC, and I was there right before a GAC, and she was kind of asking me about my job in credit unions and like, what is a credit union? And I was walking down the street with her, and I explained to her the whole concept. She turns to me and she's like, "Why aren't we all members of credit unions?" And I'm like, I know, exactly. So we have what we have on our side is the business model. We have the mission. We have the right incentives as organizations, and we just got to tell that story. We got to keep telling that story. So with that, you want to share one more thing?
one more. I know we're
Okay.
well over time, but you should have known we couldn't have done this.
No, I knew it. I knew
Yeah.
it.
But I want to go back to one thing you said when we were talking about opportunities. So one other thing. So a lot of, I've run into and talked to a lot of small credit unions. As you know, I'm always willing to share whenever a small credit union calls me. Smaller than I am a small credit union, or larger than me. I talk to some that's larger than me. And I've run into a lot that will say, well, when it comes down to unsecured loans, we won't lend more than 5,000 or 10,000. That's our policy. And I asked why. And they said, well, we're just afraid if that loan goes bad. And I asked them, I said, well, how much will you lend on a car? And they said, well, 100, 110, 115, 120, 125% of the value of the car. I said, well, do you cap? Like, will you lend? If somebody came to you and wanted to buy a car that was $100,000, would you lend 125% of it? So some of them say I have to get approval because it's over my approval limit, but most of them say, yeah. And I asked, I said, well, so if I buy a car that's $100,000 or even 70,000, and I drive it for about a year, I don't take care of it. I go out and have an accident, and I let my insurance expire 3 days before the accident happened. And you get the car back and it's pretty wrecked. How much are you going to get for that vehicle? The answer is not much, right?
Right.
So technically, we get so caught up on the collateral of that vehicle, but that vehicle isn't much more than an unsecured loan.
Right.
The other thing is, when I show them this, I'm like, what was the interest rate you charged on that vehicle? It's very little. So if you factor that in, you didn't make a whole lot of money on the vehicle. You sold it, you got a little bit back. You still had a huge loss with very little income. Whereas if you did unsecured lending and you lent more, you didn't limit yourself. So you were able to lend $50,000 to somebody.
Yeah.
And your interest rates are double digit. So you're going to make a whole lot more income.
Yeah.
They may pay on it. Let's say they paid on it for 3 years and then they stopped. in interest, technically you've gotten everything back that you lent them.
Yeah.
They almost paid it off.
Yeah.
You didn't lose any more than you would have on that car. So it's the same as that car. Once you sold it and you wrote it off, you're writing off about the same amount. You got to think about these things a little bit differently. And quite often, those unsecured loans, they do not go bad. And if you have a graduation policy where you will lend a little bit and then you graduate them up and up and up, and you trust, you let them build trust. But when you will only lend $5,000 and a furnace costs $7,000, you're forcing them to go someplace else to get enough money for whatever they need. And you're not able to meet their needs. So they can't count on you to be their financial institution of choice. So how do you solve their problem? So, and that's what I mean about thinking different. That's what we got to do.
Yeah.
If we can just change our mindset, I think we can all start to grow.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And bringing together people like PPC and, everyone that Scott knows and all the credit unions that do this type of work like yours, I feel like we could create some programming. Something that we're thinking about is creating some sort of program to help credit unions really understand sort of this type of direction and philosophical direction. So I think we're going to get there. I know you're already there. And I just want to say thank you very much, Karen Madry, President and CEO of Afena Federal Credit Union, for taking so much time and sharing all of the great stories that you have and also your passion for credit unions. So thank you again. It was a pleasure, and let's do it again soon.
Thank you, Tom.